The holiday seasons are rapidly approaching, and it's time you start thinking about what gifts you're going to get for everyone. Now, I'm going to show you 5 really easy, really simple gifts that you can make in your shop, couple hours. Now, the ones that I picked are functional, practical, and just basically beautiful. The 5 items that I picked are a cell phone charging station, a charcuterie board, a serving tray, a bottle vase, and the last one is a dress plaque. If any of the 5 items that I mentioned aren't exactly what you're looking for, that's okay. You can also check out my Woodworking for Beginners video series. Each one of those projects in there are quick and easy, and any of those would make a beautiful gift. Any of the items you pick would also qualify as a great white elephant gift. They're all under $15. So with that said, let's get dirty. Okay, so the first thing we're going to make is we're going to make the cell phone station. Now before I get started, I'm going to use my handheld router and a roundover bit and go around all of the sides. Now I'm going to use a piece of scrap wood when I do the edges here so I don't get any tear out on these corners. So now that I have that done, I need to determine on the top piece which piece I want showing. I'm thinking I want this one. So the work I'm going to be doing is on the back side of the top piece. So I'm going to measure up 3 inches. Also need to make a measurement halfway. So this is a 5.5 inch piece. So I'm going to measure, put a little spot at 2 3/4. Now that mark just tells me where to stop. So the next thing I want to do is I want to line up my speed square with these 2 pieces that I have made here, these 2 straight edges. And I want to line up these pieces of wood with the 1-inch screws that I did a pilot hole and a countersink on. And I want to let it overlap a little bit on the left-hand side. And then I can screw these down. Alright, so now that I have that, I also want to make another mark at 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to put that mark there. And I'm going to line up this one the exact same way to that 3/4 of an inch mark. Okay, once I got it lined up, I'm going to go ahead and screw that one down. Okay, now we can go ahead and take this over to the router and get that cut. So we're going to go ahead and cut this, and remember I made that mark at the halfway. That's where I need to stop. So now I can back these out, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the smaller piece. Now on the smaller piece, I'm going to measure 1.5 inches and 2 1/4. So that's the 3/4 that I need. Now on this one, the work I'm doing is going to be on the front side, not the back side. So and then I'll make my mark at 2 3/4. Okay, so now I can put these on. I'm going to put the back one on first. So I'm going to line up my speed square and then put my straight edge down. And then I can line up the front one. Same way. Now that I got those on, I can take it over and cut it. Okay, back these screws out. And then we'll do a dry fit, see how it works. And look at that. We got a nice pretty fit there. So that's a good looking station. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to drill a couple holes. Now, I'm going to drill a hole in the center for the plug, and then I'm going to drill a hole down here towards the bottom for the plug to come through. So I'm going to base this on, so I want the halfway mark. So I'm going to drill a hole at 1 inch from the bottom. And on this one, I'm going to do 1.5 inches. Check my holes. Actually, I'm going to have this one come up a bit. So on this one, instead of 1.5 inches, I'm going to go 2 inches. That should put it right where I need it. So I will put them back together. Yeah, that looks good. So now that I like where they are, I'm going to just make sure they are right in the center. And now I can take this over to the drill. And I'm going to use a Forstner bit and cut both of those holes. So let's take our cord, try it out. See if we did a... There we go. Goes right through. Comes right through. Look at that. That is pretty. Okay. So let's back that out. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a round over on both. Absolutely stunning. All right. Now before I glue it and make it permanent, I'm going to sand it. So now that we got our two pieces here, they slide together like so. We're just going to put some glue on this one, and I'll put some glue on this one, slide it together. So there we go. Real simple project. Took me, what, about an hour, I would say, to do these cuts and sanding. It's functional, it's inexpensive, and get yourself an 8-footer. You can spit out 3 or 4 of these, make yourself a nice jig. You can also, if you don't have the router with the flush bit, that's fine. You can cut these with a simply with a jigsaw. So once this glue dries, I'm going to go ahead and I'll probably throw a stain on it, some urethane to shine it up, and I've got myself a real inexpensive gift that I built myself. One quick note, if your cut isn't wide enough for them to slide together, don't try and force it, or that can happen. That's because I tried to squeeze out about 1/8 of an inch to get them together, and I used a hammer, hit it about 2 times, and this piece went flying somewhere. So make sure your cuts have a good fit when you put them together. Again, don't try and force them. If they don't slide together, make your cut a little bit wider, sand maybe a little bit. Just make sure that they just slide together nice and easy. For this next project, we're going to be doing a charcuterie board. And they're getting pretty popular right now. And what I do when I make these is I accumulate a lot of scrap wood from the cuts that I do for some of the chairs that I make. So when I get enough of it, I just go ahead and run it through my table saw and cut 1-inch strips. Now these 1-inch strips I can use to line up and make a really nice charcuterie board. So I'm just going to take these strips and put them on. Now if you wonder what I'm looking at, I am looking to see which side I want to show. That's what I'm checking out when I'm putting these on here. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of line up the bottoms just to see. I'm going to turn this one around. Just to see how big of a board I'm going to get. Turn this one around. Okay, so that's not a bad board right there. Maybe I can incorporate some of these. That one would be okay. I don't like these two knots touching. And this one's just got too much of a slant, and this one already has a rounded edge, which I think would be okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so when I'm done gluing this, I'm actually going to take it over to my miter saw and straighten these edges that I have here. But first, let's get it glued up. So I'm going to put these pieces up. So I'm just going to flip them all back down. Line up the bases again. Perfect. Okay, so before I put pressure on it, I'm just going to clean up all this glue. I'm going to be doing a more thorough cleaning of it after I start clamping it. Want as little squeeze out as possible. I do run it through the planer just to get it all nice and flat. If you don't have a planer, that's okay. Just a little bit more sanding. All right. So I'm going to start by just putting a little bit of pressure on it. Now that I got that pressure, I'm going to clean out more glue. So now before I tighten it down all the way, I'm going to go ahead and put some cross members on here. Again, just tightening them down until they have some pressure. I'm going to rotate my clamps here in a second. So I had to move the clamps. I realized I put them too close to these handles, so I couldn't rotate the handles. So, simple mistake. Anyway, so now I'm just going to start tightening these down. And I can see some glue popping out here. Okay, put a little bit more pressure here and here. Here and here, and tighten this down just a little bit more. And again, wipe off any glue squeeze out. So there we go. We're going to go ahead and let this glue dry overnight. We're going to take these clamps off tomorrow. We'll put it on the miter saw, trim it up, and then we're going to pass it through the router a couple times just to get it nice and smooth. So in the meantime, I'm just going to kind of figure out which part of this piece of wood I want to use as the edge decoration. So in looking at it, I'm thinking about here. So about here to here. So that's going to kind of be my edge decoration on both sides. Of course, I'll sand it up a little bit, do a little round over on it, make it look good. But I think that'll work. We'll have to check that out tomorrow. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to run this through the table saw to straighten up these edges here on the sides. Now remember, I made one side flush. So I'm going to start with that side against my rip fence, and I just want to trim this. I don't want to take too much off. So I'm going to trim it right there. That should be good. Alright, so now that I have that side trimmed, I can go ahead and trim up this side. Again, I'm just shaving a little bit of it off just to get it nice and flush. So now I have both sides nice and flush. I'm going to go ahead and do a round over bit on the whole thing, front and back. And then I'm going to sand the bejesus out of it. So let's start the sanding now. And I'm going to hit it rough with 80. And then I'm going to move down from there. Probably go 120, 150. All right, and the last one I'm going to hit it with is the 150. Now with the 150, I didn't do the back side. I'm perfectly okay with a 120 being done on the back side. Now my final sanding will be with a 220, but I'm going to do this one by hand. I want to get the feel of my board. So I'm going to do all of the edges with a 220. So when I say get the feel of my board, I want to feel if there's any mistakes that I've made, or there's a rough spot that I need to work on. Sanding is a great time to get up close and personal with your project. I know it's tedious, it's kind of boring, but it's just that time that you can spend with your project. Kind of look it over while you're sanding. Feel your sandpaper if there's anything that you need to work on. Alright, so the last and final step, we're going to be putting cutting board oil on this. This is a food grade mineral oil, and this will help protect the project. With the cutting board oils, you want to put it on. It's a soaking oil, so you want to make sure that you give it time to kind of soak in. That will allow you to protect the project. Now there are other choices that you can use for doing cutting boards. This is the one I've pretty much used my whole time. But if there's one that you prefer over just a basic mineral oil, you go right ahead. You want to stay away from like polyurethane, stuff like that. Polyurethane has chemicals in it. It's not a food grade, and this, with a charcuterie board like this, people put food directly on it. So you definitely don't want to be using something that's poisonous or can make someone sick on your board. Now some people have asked, can I just go ahead and use a regular like cooking oil, like canola oil, olive oil, something like that? No, you can't. The reason why is because over time, now remember, this soaks into the wood to protect it. So if you're using a canola oil, olive oil, anything like that, over time, those oils spoil, get rotten. So you don't want that in your wood getting rotten, and it'll probably discolor it, along with make a pretty funky smell. So go ahead and use what's recommended. Get a cutting board oil. You can use walnut oil. The concern with that is, what if someone has a nut allergy? Walnut oil is a great protector, but they haven't really proven if it'll cause someone that has a nut allergy to react. So I tend to stay away from it. I don't want to be that guy. So there we go. So there's our charcuterie board. Now, again, it's functional. It's a great gift, and I probably have a whole, maybe $6 invested in this for materials. So, I mean, if you're doing a white elephant gift, $15, $10 below, then this is perfect. If you're going to a cheap Christmas party that only has a $5 limit, go ahead and cut off, when you run it through the table saw, cut off maybe this line right here and this line right here. And you should be fine. It should be $5 then. So there we go. It's got a purpose, it's functional, it's beautiful, and you whipped it out in, 1-2 hours tops. Okay, so here's another pretty easy one. This is going to be the bottle vase. Now, the bottles I used are the Henry Weinhard's orange cream, I believe is what I bought. So, and then I drank it, soaked them in hot water to get the stickers off. So I'm going to be using 4 bottles. And then for my wood, let me look at my notes here. So I cut 2 pieces of 1x4 at 13.5, and 2 pieces at 9 3/4. Now, when it came to the holes, I put the hole centered at 2 1/4, then every 3 inches on center after that. And then when it came to the sides, I went ahead and did a 1/4 inch rabbet bit or rabbet joint on each one. So when it's assembled, it's going to look like this with the bottles in it. Now, when it came to putting the holes in, I did a 1 3/8 inch Forstner bit. Now, what I wanted to make sure of is that the bottle could be lifted up, turned, and taken out. That way, you know, if the bottle gets gunky after having flowers in it, it can be washed. So I didn't want the bottles to be stuck in there forever. So with that said, it's going to be a pretty easy assembly here. I'm just going to go ahead and put some glue on each rabbet bit. I'll go ahead and put a square clamp on there because, you know what, I don't want my fingers in there when I hit it with the nail gun. So make sure everything's lined up, and then we'll get this clamped down here. So now that we got it clamped down, I'm just going to throw some brad nails in there. Now I'm going to do the same for the other side here. And my first thought was to hold it and hit it with the nails, and I thought, you know, probably not a good idea. So I got my 1/4 inch rabbet joint, cut it 3/4 to hold the piece of wood here. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the top. So I'm going to put some glue. Then I'm going to put my top on. Instead of using the square clamp, I'm just going to use a regular clamp here. So if you don't have a brad nailer like this, that's fine. You can go ahead and put some probably 1.5 inch screws on each one of these, and it would work just fine. So now I got my frame, and the bottles are going to go in just like this. I made the holes a little bit larger so I can take the bottles in and out so they could be washed. So there we go. Got some sanding to do, and that's okay. So you just put some water in these, put some flowers in them, and there's a bottle flower vase. Pretty simple. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the sanding. We got to wait for the glue to dry because it's still a little wobbly. So I did some sanding, and what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and use a roundover bit on the tops here. Yeah, I like that much better. So I'm going to continue sanding. That was an 80 grit. I'm going to go ahead and hit this now with a 150 to soften it up. There it is. It's all sanded up. Now I just got to pick a finish for it. Going to be an interior. I haven't decided if I wanted to paint it, if I'm going to stain it and put a urethane on it. I really haven't decided. But if this is a gift for someone, kind of take a look at what they've got inside their house and try to match kind of like their decor, and then that way you're kind of, you know, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You've given them a really unique gift, and you're also going with their decoration style. So keep that in mind when you go over to their house. Kind of take a look around and see, you know, are they farmhouse? Are they modern? You know, and that will tell you what kind of finish to put on this. So, and that's it. It's a simple, quick, unique gift, functional, practical. So let's get ready to start the 5th one, which is the address plaque. Okay, so the last thing we're going to make in this series is we're going to make it's a wall plaque that'll hold an address number. So I've got two 1x6s here, and I cut these at 24 inches because the measurement of where I wanted to put it is 24 inches. So just take a measurement of where you want it before you cut it, so you've got the right size. So this one here, again, is 24 inches. Now the first thing we got to do is we got to do a glue up. So we're going to put some glue right here on this side, and then we're going to glue these two boards together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp it down, but I'm just going to barely tighten it so I still have maneuverability in here. So that allows me to make any adjustments last minute. Okay, so now that I have just a little bit of pressure on it, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I do have some glue coming through. So I'm going to get myself a wet rag and wipe off this squeeze out before I move on. It's good to get as much squeeze out as you can get in the beginning, because that is less time you're going to have to be working with trying to sand dried glue. Okay, so now that I have that, I want to put some cross members on here just so I know that everything's squaring up properly. So I'm going to put one on this side. Again, I'm just barely putting some pressure on there for right now. And then I'm going to put one over here on this side. So then I just have just a little bit of pressure on there. I'm going to go ahead and finish the clamps and tighten them up. Got a little bit more squeeze out coming, so I'll take care of that. Now the way I'm gluing this with the side I want to show up, so that's why I'm just making sure that my seams are lining up properly here. So we're going to move that aside, and we're going to start making just a little planter that I'm going to attach to it. Just something that you can throw some succulents on just to pretty it up. So I've got a 10-inch 1x4. I got two 3.5-inch 1x4s and an 8.5-inch 1x4 for the base. Get out my brad nailer and we'll tack it down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the front to one of the sides. And once I got it squared up, I'm just going to put a couple brad nails in. Alright, I did put a little bead of glue there too. So the next piece I want to put on is I'm going to go ahead and put the base on here. So I'm going to get this all squared up. So I put got to put some glue here. Now if it's being difficult, just go ahead and throw a clamp on it. Alright, so I got that piece on. Now I want to put the last side on. So I'm going to throw some glue here, and I'm going to throw some glue here. Now, I always keep my hands clear of this whenever I use the brad nailer, because you never know when one of those nails are going to hit something and shoot out. So it has happened, but my hands were clear. Just like that. That's exactly what I avoid. That's why I keep my hands clear. Let me see, make sure you can see that. That thing hit something and shot out. See, now if I'd had my hands there, I would be a permanent part of this project. Alright, so get any glue off, and I'm just going to throw another brad here since that one shot out. Now I'm just going to take a hammer and whack that into the wood. Alright, so we have the planter ready, and the plaque that we're going to mount to our house with the house number on it is drying. Both of these have to dry. So we'll come back to this project in a few hours. So I will see you then. So the glue is dry and I've removed it from the clamps. I did some preliminary sanding to it, but I did not soften the edges yet. And I'll show you why here in a bit when I do the staining on it. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to attach the planter box. Now, when I mount this, since I'm going to be mounting it into wood on my house, I'm just going to do it with some screws. If you're putting it into something like brick or something like that, I would actually recommend doing some D-rings on the back instead of screws, and that'll work much better. Alright, so when I mount this box, I'm going to mount it about 2 inches from the edge. So I'm just going to use my combination square to get me my 2 inches. Now you see I kind of have it lifted up into the air here. That's because I'm going to be using some clamps to hold the box onto the project. But first, I'm going to outline where my box goes, just using a regular pencil here. So now that I have that outline, I'm going to go ahead and put some holes. And now these holes are actually going to become my pilot holes. Now that I have those holes, the next thing I want to do is I want to put a bead of glue on the side that's going to attach to the project itself. So my next step is just clamping the planter box directly onto the project. So now that I got it clamped, get these out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and finish some of these pilot holes here, the ones I can get to. Alright, so I got to those 3, and I'm going to go ahead and countersink. So once I have these 3 screws in, I can remove the clamps. So I'm going to put these 3 in right now. Alright, so I got the 3 screws in. So I'm going to take the clamps off, and I'm going to finish the rest of the holes. So I've got 1, 2, looks like 4. And of course I want to countersink. And then I'll just set these 4 screws. These are 1 5/8 inch deck screws that I'm using. Alright, so there we go. Another thing I did is I went ahead and filled the holes on the front of this piece here where I put those brad nails. I just used some wood filler. Now I just got a moist rag here to get any possible glue squeeze out. Just everywhere that's visible. I'm not really going to spend a lot of time working on the inside there. Alright, so there's where we're at now. Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the 4 screw holes in where I want to mount it with the screws. So I'm going to set my combination square for 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to just make X's using the combination square. And that's where I'm going to be putting the 4 holes for the mounting screws. And I'm going to go ahead and scribe these holes so I got the good starting point. Alright, so now my next step is putting the 4 holes in, and I'm going to need a piece of sacrificial for that. And I do want those countersunk. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick sand, get these pencil marks off. And the one thing I'm not going to do when I'm sanding is I'm not going to soften these edges yet. I'm going to go ahead and stain this. Now I wanted a fairly dark color, but not too dark. And what I mean is, because when I put the house numbers on here, they're going to be black. So if I went with a like a mahogany or something really dark, you wouldn't be able to see the numbers. But I still wanted something kind of dark, so I went with this pecan. So I'm just going to go ahead and stain this using the pecan, and that's dark enough, but I don't think this is too dark to where you won't be able to see the house numbers. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish all the staining off camera. So we'll be right back. So now that it's stained, now I'm going to soften the edges. And the stain, it actually came out very well. I mean, it's dark enough that it accomplished the darkness that I wanted, but I don't think that is too dark for some 5 or 6 inch black house numbers to go on there. I think that this is perfect. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to go ahead and soften the edges now, and that way I got basically some wood showing through on all the sides to kind of give it a weathered look. So I'm going to do that now. So there we go. See how I soften the edges and it just kind of makes all these edges pop? I think that gives it a great weathered look. That's that. Now the only thing left for me to do is, this is going to be an outdoor project. So I'm going to throw some spar urethane over the top of this. And this is completed. So now we're going to make a really simple and elegant serving tray. So I've got 2 pieces of 1x4 here. I cut at 26 inches. And I got a piece of 1x6 that I also cut at 26 inches. So I'm going to glue these together. And then I just grabbed a couple pieces of reclaim wood. I'm going to mount them here. And then I just went and bought a couple handles. So there was handles to carry it for the serving tray. So with that said, let's get started. So like I said, our first step is to glue these 3 pieces together. Now I already picked out which pieces I want on the top. So those are sitting here. So I'm going to flip this one up and this one up. And I'm going to put some glue on those 2 edges. Put a bead on on this side here. Alright. Now I can butt them together. So when I'm tightening these down, I'm just going to tighten them until the clamp touches. And I'll show you why here in a second. So let me get this one down. I just want the slightest bit of force on these. I'll do some adjusting. So now that I got just a little bit of pressure on them, I'm going to start by getting my glue squeeze out off of there. Because I want as little squeeze out on these as possible. Not overly worried about the bottom side. Alright, now that I got that, I'm going to put some cross members on here to help keep them lined up together. And again, I'm just putting the clamps on just till they touch. I'm not actually tightening it down yet. I'm going to do the same for this side. Okay, so now that I have that pressure on, now I'm going to kind of rotate my clamping. So I'm going to tighten this one a little bit, and I'm going to do that again. Okay, so I got a good clamp there, good clamp there, and I got a good clamp there. All right, so again, I'm just going to hit this glue squeeze out. Might have a little bit underneath these crossbars here, and that's okay, I can sand that. Got a little bit of unevenness here, so I'm going to fix that now. Just loosen this one up and then tighten it back down. So now we can just let this sit overnight and we'll come back to it tomorrow. Okay, so now that our serving tray is dry, we got to get ready to apply these handles. I just went and got these at the big box store. Now the spacing on the bolts for those are 3 3/4 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick which side of this piece of wood I want to show. So I'm going to pick this side, so I'm going to work on the back side. Now the first thing I'm going to do is these are cut at 12 1/2. So I'm going to make a mark at 6 1/4, which is the halfway mark of the length. Now I want to make a mark from there at, so it's 2 1/2. So I'm going to do 1 1/4. Now that is the exact center point of this piece of wood. So now I've got to center up my handle, and the dog found a glove. Okay, so in order to do that, from this center point right here, half of 3 3/4 of an inch, so 1 7/8 is what I want to mark on both sides. That'll be exactly the distance of my handle. So let's see, 1 and 1, 2, 5, 6, 7. 1 7/8. Do the same thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1 7/8. All right, now so the distance, if I did my math right, should be 3 3/4, which it is. All right, so now I know that this handle is going to fit perfectly right there. Now I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and clamp them together and drill the hole through both. Basically right now I'm just making the pilot hole for the handle itself. I think I want to put a bigger drill bit on here. So I went and got some larger screws for the handle because I got to go through 2 3/4 of an inch pieces. So I went and got some 1 1/4 inch screws because the ones that come with it are only 1 inch. So I want to make them just a little bit bigger. All right, so I'm going to switch this out for a 5/32 drill bit. Should be exactly what I need. So now I'm going to drill these 2 holes and then just check and see if I got a fit. And it's kind of tight. No, actually that is pretty good. So I got myself a 3/4 inch piece of wood here that I'm going to use as a spacer. I'm going to do 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to set this so that the spacer is right on the edge of the wood. And then I've got to make sure that at least one side of this piece is flush against the edge because I'm going to run this through the table saw to square it up. So that one's flush. So now I can go ahead and finish my holes right into the serving tray. And I'm going to do the same exact thing for this side over here. So now, so the next thing I want to do is I'm going to flip my project over because I need to put some countersink in here for the screws. Remember I told you they're 1.25 inches, so I at least want to go about 1/2 inch at least. So about the depth, yeah. All right. So I'm going to switch out this drill bit and I'm going to put a Forstner bit on there. So now I'm using the 1/2 inch Forstner bit, and what I want to do is I want to just dig down a little bit so I have the head of the screw into the wood. So for this I'm just going to the depth of the cutter head, which turns out to be 1/2 inch. That comes all the way through, which it does not. And that's okay, because I accounted for that, and I also bought some 1.5 inches. I think what I'm running into here is that the reclaimed wood I'm using is just a little bit bigger than 3/4 inch. So let's pop that out. So the 1.25 inches, and put the 1.5 inches in there. Now I should be okay. Okay, so that was the dry run is working pretty good. So I'm going to back this handle out. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to back that out and just do the dry run is because I do want to put a bead of glue on both of these before I set them. Remember, I switched to 1.5 inches instead of 1.25 inches. And these are the number 8-32 1.5 inch truss head combo. Alright, so I got my Phillips head here, and I'm going to tighten these down. Basically what I did is I stripped them out, so they have a little bit more play. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing for this side over here. And then I realized I put glue on the wrong side. This is the side I wanted down, so I wiped it off, wet rag. Alright, so I'm going to use my Phillips head again. So now I can go ahead and put the handles on. It should line up perfectly if my math is correct. Okay, so as it turns out, I was a little bit off on where I put my holes by about 1 millimeter, which when you're working with these handles, that matters. So what I did is I went and grabbed a larger size drill bit. I went the next size up. So I'm just going to make this hole a little bit bigger, not just pick one of the holes, because you want one of them nice and tight so the handle doesn't move around. Alright, so now that I got them in, I'm going to hand screw, just to make sure they're nice and tight, serving tray, so your wife can bring you breakfast in bed. Okay. So now, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and square up the sides real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up now. Alright, so what I want to do is I just want to give it a shave, basically. And it looks good. I'll line that up there, just to make all my sides nice and flush. I'm going to raise the blade up a bit though, so I get both pieces, and then buzz it through. Just set up the other side for a quick shave. So I'm gonna sand this, and I'm gonna make sure I go ahead and hit all these sharp edges here. Give it a little sanding in the center. Probably hit it with a 150 here in the middle. So I'm gonna get that started now. So before I hit it with the 150 here to smooth everything out, right here are two sharp edges I couldn't really get with this sander because I don't want to hit these handles. I don't want to scratch them all up. So I'm going to just grab a piece of some 80 grit sandpaper. I lied. I'm going to go with a 120. I'm going to grab a piece of 120 and I'm just going to hand sand these two edges right here. Again, I want to make sure when I'm doing this though that I don't hit these handles, but I do want to get rid of these sharp edges. Alright, one thing I noticed, yes, I did not. So I didn't get rid of the sharp edges here on the back side, so I'm going to knock that out real quick. Stunning. Alright, let's hit it with the 150. Alright, so now I'm going to take my 120 and I'm going to sand the areas where I did the edge with the 80 grit just to smooth them out. Now I know sanding is boring and tedious, but when you're hand sanding, that gives you time with your project. So you can kind of look it over while you're sanding, see if there's anything you missed. Kind of check it over. Make sure it's something that you're really proud of. Now let's get all the sawdust off of here and get it ready to seal. Now this is a serving tray, so I'm assuming, and I probably shouldn't do that, but I'm assuming that people are going to be putting, you know, like a teapot, cups, etc., etc., you know, something to serve off of. And I'm not expecting people to use it to place food directly on it. So I'm going to go ahead and use a Canuba wax. Now, Canuba wax is a rub-on product, easy to apply, and it will protect your project. So this is the paste wax I'm going to be using. This is Howard's. It is a Canuba wax. It also has some beeswax in it, so that's fantastic. Both of which are great products. Don't have to worry about any allergies, and it will protect your project. So all you gotta do is just wipe it on, and it creates a wax layer. Simple project, couple hours, probably spending more time waiting for your glue to dry than you are actually working on the project itself. If you have a white elephant gift exchange, I think the handles were the most expensive thing. They were, I don't remember, I think $7 a piece. So I have about $14, $15 invested in this. So if you have a $15 limit, this should fall under the category. If you think it's going to go over, get some cheaper handles. But there we go. So again, real simple. Just wipes on, creates a wax buildup, protects your project. Just double checking my end grains. End grains seem to soak this stuff up a little bit more than regular grains. So there we go. It's functional, it's practical. Get what, couple hours at most. You know, go down to your shop, throw on some tunage, grab a couple pieces of wood, and you've got a great, inexpensive gift idea that you made yourself. So there we go. 5 quick and easy projects that are functional and practical. So here's 3 of the 5. The charcuterie board and serving tray were kind of confiscated by my wife. She wrapped them up and took them to her Christmas party at work to give away as the white elephant gift. And that's okay, it worked in my favor because now everyone's asking her if I can make them something, so I'll probably make a little money off of that. And that's great, free advertising. Heck, you could probably even make a jig to duplicate a lot of these cuts. That way you can make multiple projects, like, you know, this phone holder here, or the cell phone charger. 1 piece of wood, you could probably get about 3 or 4 of these, a 1 8-foot piece of wood, and they're practical, they're functional, absolutely beautiful. They're made by you. People will really enjoy that. I hope you've liked this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified of new episodes as they become available. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment section. I will get to them as soon as I can. If you're new to the woodworking hobby, check out my Woodworking for Beginners video series, 12-part series. Get you up and going as a woodworker in no time. If you'd like to support my channel, I'll put a link down in the description for donations. I'll also link everything that I use to make these projects. So until next time, have a Merry Christmas and keep it safe.